Here goes. While Plato and Thucydides do not view democracy as a functional form of government, Plato denounces it completely, whereas Thucydides argues that it can be successful, but only under the right leadership. He proposes that a democracy under the instruction of a leader skilled in speech and persuasion has the potential to become the greatest state, offering Pericles as an example when he describes him as the foremost Athenian and the most able in speech or action. Plato disagrees outright with this statement, declaring that no state is complete unless ruled by philosopher kings, philosophers who have been specially selected to run the state. This paper will educate and enlighten the reader as to why Thucydides does not share Plato's severe judgment of democracy by exploring the democratic themes of leadership, freedom of action and speech, and the well-being of the state. Additionally, it will argue why Thucydides is right to disagree with Plato. First of all, Plato's primary concern with democracy is that it allows the majority a political voice, essentially giving the average individual political power. In offering his vision of the ultimate city-state, Callipolis, he asserts that only philosopher kings, having undergone rigorous training and received a comprehensive education, can rid the state of evils. He maintains that only a select and elite class of philosopher kings should be given this responsibility, for there can be no happiness, either public or private, in any other city. A state becomes the ultimate state once it attains justice, which is his fundamental concern. He elaborates that not only are philosopher kings highly educated and trained, most importantly, they possess souls ruled by philosophical reason, as opposed to spirit or appetite. He supports this statement by classifying people into three categories, three classes of souls, those ruled by reason, spirit, and appetite. Whichever one's soul is ruled by is depicted by Plato to be a natural distinction and indicative of one's purpose. As only souls ruled internally by reason can attain knowledge and seek justice, Plato decrees that it is the most desirable and natural option to have philosopher kings in charge of the city-state, when he states that the desires of the inferior many are controlled by the superior few. This agreement between the naturally worse and the naturally better as to which of the two is to rule both in the city and each one is moderation. Philosopher kings belong to the first class, with souls ruled by reason. They are educated, trained, and then tested to prove their worthiness and capability as leaders of the state. The second class consists of guardians, people whose souls are ruled by spirit. In Callipolis, they characterize its military force and also comprise the pool from which future philosopher kings are selected from. The third, final, and majority class, the common people, are ruled by appetite and base desires. They fund the state financially but lack all military and political power due to their inferior souls. Plato declares that because this class is ruled internally by appetite, these people cannot attempt to achieve justice on their own. He elaborates on this, declaring that meddling in exchange between these three classes, then, is the greatest harm that can happen to the city, and would rightly be called the worst thing someone could do to it. Therefore, this third class must be ruled by reason externally, under the guidance of the philosopher kings of the first class. Accordingly, it would be unnatural to have ordinary people running the state, as advocated in a democratic system. Since democracy also promotes and encourages people to speak, decide, and act as they like, viewing them as equal individuals of the state, for the most part, we encounter Plato's second major concern with democracy, allowing variety in one's work. He is firmly opposed to this system, wanting to order society to aptitude, as justice corresponds to the order which arises when each does one's own work that they are best suited for and thus best at, and does not meddle with what isn't one's own. He strives to establish this order. Through this specialized system, people become content and feel a sense of accomplishment. He sees democrats as solely concerned with their daily affairs and living material and superficial lives. They are unhappy living in an unjust environment which calls for Plato's solution of philosopher kings, the men naturally imbued with the ability to rule and lead the city-state to justice. Once the state and its people have attained justice, they will experience eudaimonia, an eternal sense of happiness and a harmonic balance in the cosmos. Consequently, Plato disapproves of democracy, placing it second only to tyranny in his illustration of the four diseased constitutions: democracy, oligarchy, democracy, and tyranny. Though Thucydides also critiques democracy, he differs from Plato by not labeling it a diseased system, but rather as oppressive and insufficient on its own. Having a poor view of human nature, he sees it necessary for a working democracy to have a capable leader in control, a stabilizing force. This theoretical leader must be able to predict the behavior of its state as a democracy, in order to avoid exile at the hands of the people. In other words, he must be able to understand human nature and effectively guide public sentiment and actions. Thucydides stresses the importance of speech in the political arena, as its leader must possess skills in oratory in order to advise, steer, and persuade his public as necessary. In addition, his leader must be blessed with phronesis, a type of rationale that formulates an action or series of actions based on a specific and practical reason. He presents Pericles as a model for the type of leader he deems necessary for a working democracy. He demonstrates how Pericles' individual qualities and skills enabled him to be the most effective leader of the democracy. His ability to speak to and persuade people gained him their respect and deference. In this way, he proved himself capable of the position and worked to connect the state and its inhabitants, creating a sense of solidarity amongst his peers. He was also able to maintain a delicate balance between Athens having a democratic system of government while having an imperialistic identity. Thucydides admires this ability to balance justice and the use of might, but especially Pericles' recognition that both democracy and empire were merely the means to attaining Athenian glory, and not the ends in and of themselves. He draws upon Pericles' democratic imperial balance as an example of why democracy will falter on its own, and the necessity of force as a stabilizing counterpoint. With the example of Pericles, Thucydides argues that one should be judged by their individual abilities and capabilities as governor of the city-state, as opposed to Plato's theory of fixed philosopher kings. Additionally, being a pragmatic philosopher, Thucydides offers phronesis, practical concept of reason, which clashes with Plato's undefined and nearly unattainable concept of philosophical reason, the basis for his argument of the necessity of philosopher kings. Unlike Thucydides, Plato has no place for individuals in his Callipolis, since education and training are essential in the development of philosopher kings. His sole focus is on gaining knowledge, truth, and justice, which the state can do by following his instructions. Therefore, it would appear that he does not care about people as individuals seeking happiness or fulfillment, but as a collective unit striving to attain happiness and contentment, eudaimonia. As such, he does not embrace the concept of freedom of speech and action allowed to individuals in a democracy. Moreover, he views the democratic person itself as a lotus eater, a worthless being consumed with personal desires and cursory ambitions. In his ideal city-state, Callipolis, he promotes the idea that the majority of people should be manipulated into accepting their subordinate status. With the myth of metals, people will believe that their status in society is natural. The first class is born with the most valuable metal, gold, mixed into their souls, as they are best equipped to rule, the second with silver, and the majority with bronze. Believing that people innately possess different values of metals ensures that they accept and abide by the fact that their station in life is predetermined and fixed. Democratic ideals of encouraging individuals to voice thoughts and opinion, discuss and debate issues, and implement changes that will benefit the state interfere with Plato's ultimate plan for the state. On the other hand, even though Thucydides does not have much faith in the human race, he does not support nor approve of Plato's methods to manipulate the public. He concedes that democratic practices serve to educate and strengthen the relationships between individuals, a feat that Pericles achieves through his speeches. When he put them into fear with his speeches, and again when they were afraid without reason, he would raise up their spirits and give them courage. Thus, Thucydides determines that the use of language plays a pivotal role in politics and democracy. It is a vital and effective political tool because people live in a world of words that shapes their character and influences how they act. Democracy understands and embraces this concept in its promotion of freedoms amongst individuals, while Plato would like to totally control one's thoughts and actions. Revealingly, Plato's notion of the benefit of the state revolves solely around reaching justice. Everything appears to be black and white for him. His only concern is to implement a system akin to his vision of Callipolis. Democracy embodies everything he doesn't believe in, putting the class of people ruled internally by appetite in charge of the city-state. Alternatively, Thucydides is in agreement with several democratic ideals and practices, such as utilizing speech to educate and strengthen the bonds of the state and its inhabitants. He supports seeing people as individuals' personal abilities and qualities to be recognized and appreciated. However, he finds democracy by itself to be oppressive, thereby requiring a stabilizing hand. This is supported by his declaration that although Athens was in name a democracy, it was in fact a government by its first man. In conclusion, though Plato condemns democracy as a dysfunctional political system, he invites criticism with his need to manipulate people with deception in his quest for justice. For how can a system that relies on lies be considered better than democracy, a system advocating freedom? Conversely, though Thucydides criticizes democracy, declaring it inadequate as a sole governing system, he sees its potential to be fully functional with the leadership of an individual possessing qualities rivaling Pericles. Unlike Plato, he does not completely dismiss democracy as a practical political constitution, nor offer an unethical alternative, thereby presenting a more compelling argument in his critique of democracy. And I'm finally done. Hopefully this sounds good.